Okay, good morning, everybody. Well, welcome. Happy Wednesday morning. Hopefully, everyone's doing well. I am slowly coming out of my jet lags this morning. Instead of waking up at 1 a.m., I woke up at 2 a.m. And so, so I'll transition to more of a normal time, which would be closer to 5 or 6. So maybe a couple more days I'll be there. So I got up and did some exercise pretty early this morning. And so happy to be here with you guys. Recorded a bunch of videos for YouTube and whatnot. And so speaking of YouTube, we've got some folks listening in on YouTube. And so I will try to pop back and forth there and try to answer some questions for the YouTube folks. So as you guys know, or some of you guys know, I'm going to be here today, tomorrow, then Friday. I'm at KetoCon, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I guess Monday morning because I'm flying back on Monday morning. So I'll be probably out those days. I'm thinking. So we'll have to see, if I can sneak in there again. I've got a lot of people that I keep messaging me, hey, can I meet with you? Can we go? I've got, a lot of people wanting me to eat with them and hang out with them. And so I'm trying my best to do that, as well as meeting some of the people that, are that are going to be from this community, which would be nice. And, it's always fun to meet people in real life, to see how that goes. Trying to think if there's anything. I noticed that, I was following more up on Eric Adams, the New York City mayor, has declared that, we're going to, and they're part of this so-called C40s initiative. And so these C40 cities, they're trying to 15-minute cities and, save the planet, go green. And as part of their efforts, they want to encourage their populations to eat less meat, eat less dairy, because in their minds, it is, leading to global climate catastrophe, which, I think the evidence on that is at best questionable and perhaps, not even realistic at all. But regardless, one of the things that he's mentioned is that they're partnering, I think, with American Express to start tracking people's consumption, and so what does that mean? If they can track your consumption, well, then they can perhaps restrict your consumption. And so, people worry about, if we have the digital bank currency where they can sort of turn your money on and off, it's like, you spent you exceeded your carbon credit score for this week. Sorry, you're going to have to eat tofu instead. That obviously will not work well for many in this community who, absolutely rely on having meat in the diet for their mental health, their sanity, their health. I mean, some people are type 1 diabetics that, don't do well with carbs. And so there's some challenges there. Now, Michael Bloomberg, who was mayor, I believe, in 2012, proposed, they wanted to limit somehow, like, soft drinks, sugar drinks, like either not allowed to sell the big ones or something, I can't remember. And the thought was that we were going to perhaps help with childhood obesity, perhaps improve the metabolic health. That got squashed. Now, I don't know if, the Coca-Cola executives flew in there and petitioned some federal judge or state judge, and they overturned that. So they banned that. Now, it will be interesting to see what happens with this beef thing, because, the people that were likely to be harmed by the restriction of sugary sales are going to be pharmaceutical industries and big food, namely Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and so on and so forth, because it's going to hurt their bottom line, right? The less diabetic people, less drugs we can sell, so on and so forth. But now on the other end, if we remove wholesome, nutritious foods like beef and dairy from the diet, well, what's likely to happen? You're going to see more people that are then shifting over to more hyper-processed diets. We clearly see it. There's a nice study that came out, I know, a year or two ago, looking at plant-based dieters, and they saw that the vegans were the ones that are most likely to eat the highest percentage of processed foods. Now, these are the junk food vegans, but I mean, this is, more so than vegetarians, and certainly more so than meat eaters, So they know that they can remove meat and dairy from the product. People just gravitate naturally towards, because they're hungry and they want energy. So they're going to gravitate naturally to this hyper-processed, hyper-concentrated, energy-intense foods which don't have much nutrition. They don't have the nutritional powerhouse that you get in things like meat, eggs, dairy, and so on and so forth. So you just get the energy without the nutrition. And what does that lead to? Well, it leads to overeating. It leads to disease. And what does that lead to? Well, it leads to profits for drug companies. So we'll see, will this thing stand? Will some court come in and step in and say, hey, that's overstepping your bounds, it's unconstitutional, blah, blah, blah. You cannot tell people what to eat. I don't know. I'll see, we'll see where the real interests lie. I mean, I'd like to see the, people like the NCBA, National Cattlemen's Beef Association, step in there and file a lawsuit against this stuff. I mean, this is absolutely abhorrent in my mind, as somebody who's highly, obviously my experience has been, I see people every single day, and many of you guys listening in right now are the very ones I'm talking about, who have absolutely recovered their health and maintained their health by including lots of animal products in their diets. And so, again, this is something, like, well, I don't live in New York, who cares? It'll come, it'll spread like a cancer. I mean, it'll go to New York and California and Seattle and all the major metropolitan areas. And then, then state lawmakers will take it up. And then it's all in the name of saving the planet. And again, the science on that is so unconvincing to me. I mean, it's not that, I think Alex Epstein's in his book talks about, yes, there is some warming going on, and some of it is anthropogenic. That is to say, man is causing that. But does it justify the response? Does it justify, getting rid of all the nuclear power plants and coal plants and oil rigs and replace it with something less reliable, more expensive, that will leave millions of people without power, without heat in the wintertime, potentially. And then the same thing with the food. Does it putting all these people on this hyper processed food, what does that do to society? It's absolutely the wrong thing. So anyway, that's my opening salvo for today, I suppose. And I would just want to say welcome to everybody. If we got anybody new folks in there, please unmute yourself, say hi. It looks like we might have a couple. I'm not sure, but I'm just gonna pop over to YouTube and see if anybody's chimed in there yet, if I can find it. Where did my trying to find, I got so many tabs open on my computer right now that it's hard to say here. Let's see, where did that go? That may be an extra one. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Jennifer is back from yesterday, commenting again. She said, I lost 40 pounds in 6 to 8 weeks and now at 120, 122 and 5'7". So that looks like a pretty normal body weight. At one point I went down to 117 when I fasted for 2 weeks while trying to fight off a cold. Yeah, I mean, there's Jennifer, such thing as too damn skinny. I mean, like I said, I mean, you gotta, have some meat on your bone, put some muscle on. I mean, that's my, that's been my sort of thing. I have a lot of people here that we've gotten healthy, gotten them off meds. They've gotten, just their health, they've regained their health. And then I'm like, okay, what's the next step? Well, in my view, it's let's get stronger. Being stronger is never a detriment to your ability to function in society. Now, you don't have to be deadlifting 500 pounds, but you should be, all of us should be in the top 1/3 of strength for our peer group. So if you're a 60-year-old female, you should be the top 1/3 strength of 60-year-olds. And that's not that, the bar's not that high. And the reason I say top 1/3 is because that's where you start to see the differentiation in positive health outcomes. The top 1/3, the top tertile, is going to be dramatically different than the bottom tertile as far as resistance from cancer, dementia, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, sarcopenia, osteopenia, osteoporosis, on and on and on. So it behooves you to, eat an adequate amount of protein, eat a high quality protein diet. An adequate, that number is variable depending on who you are, but and then I think, you should be doing some sort of strength training. In addition to, walking and things like that, just being not sedentary. But that to me is step 2 after you get healthy, after you regain your health. So you're not, and I get that there are people that are in constant pain or constant, whatever. And the first thing you may want to do is go to the gym and deadlift. I'm not saying that, but as you start to recover your health and you start to get more energy and those things that hurt you all the time stop hurting you, then you can further, turn the wheel in your favor by, changing your body composition. Your level of weight can be dictated by what you do in your kitchen, but your body composition itself is predicated on going to the gym and then, including enough protein in your diet. It's one of the things with, one of the criticisms of this new drug, Ozempic, is that a lot of people, at least in some studies, are suggestive of significant lean mass losses, and that can occur irrespective of the weight loss strategy you have. People that just don't eat, fast for like a month, they lose lean mass, and a lot of it in many cases. So, how do you mitigate that? Well, strength training, adequate protein. That should be, like I talk about people about that. Getting enough protein in your diet and doing strength training while, going into a caloric deficit or losing weight or whatever, changing your diet to more healthful food, that's always going to be beneficial to you, because that lean mass is really metabolic gold. It's something that I try to hang on to as much as I can. I'm in my now late 50s, I'll be 60 in a couple of years. And so I want to make sure I go into my 60s with as much lean mass as I can possibly have, within reason. I'm not going to be taking a bunch of drugs to get there, like, some of these bodybuilders do. But I mean, again, so at the very least, being in the top 1/3, should be a very attainable goal for just about anyone, in this group, because the strength metrics for the vast majority of the people are so pitiful. I mean, it's just like, those people can't even carry the groceries in from the grocery store, and that's quite shameful. And we shouldn't have people like that. I mean, I don't mean to demonize them, but I'm just saying we have a society that has allowed that. If you don't literally have to do anything to exist in this day, pick up your phone and dial Uber Eats, I mean, what the hell? I mean, particularly if you're on some sort of, supplemental income where you don't have to work. You just work, sit there and pick up the phone and dial up junk food. That to me that should not exist in my view. I know it sounds a little harsh-minded, but I mean, it's just something that is killing that person individually, but it's also harming society as a general rule. Nancy says she feels better when she exercises, love lifting weights. Yeah, there you go, Nancy. I mean, it's very therapeutic, physically, but also mentally. I mean, mentally, it gives you such a mental boost, and I know, like I said, when I feel fit and robust and strong, I'm happier. I'm literally happier. When I'm like injured or, haven't been able to train, I don't feel as good. I'm grouchier. I'm more anxious, I guess, and I always put it out to be like, I think human beings, when you're injured, you're vulnerable. And, it goes back to the very dawn of our species. I mean, if you're vulnerable and injured and couldn't defend yourself and couldn't run fast, you're a sitting duck. And so that's anxiety producing, provoking. Can you imagine if you had to walk through the wilderness, was crawling with saber-toothed cats and God knows what, and you had like a sprained ankle and you couldn't run? I mean, it'd be like, okay, I'm very vulnerable right now. So, and that physiology still works today. Yeah, Uber Eats. I've never done Uber Eats. I think it's an abomination. If I were the king, I would ban it, but I'm not the king. And again, and I'm not, like I said, I shouldn't say that. When I talked about the Michael Bloomberg versus Eric Adams, one wants to ban sugary drinks, one wants to ban meat or limit both of those. I mean, honestly, we shouldn't ban any of those things. People should have access to do what they want. I mean, this is in a free society. If you want to, eat garbage and blow up and destroy your health, that's your prerogative. I mean, don't come whining to everybody and say, okay, well, pay for me. I mean, you've done it to yourself. I mean, and it should be clear. I don't think there's anybody out there that actually thinks eating Little Debbie's and Twinkies and Doritos and all this garbage doesn't know that that's bad for them. I don't think there's any human on the planet. Oh, I didn't know eating jelly beans and Oreo cookies all day was bad for me. And yet people do that because, why do they do that? Because the food companies have made these things addictive, right? And I mean, but you can't plead ignorance, oh, I didn't know, I thought Mountain Dew was good for me because it's from the mountains and it's dew, just like a fresh, whatever. But I mean, like I said, it's in part your own fault. And, like I said, I mean, I get it. Once you get addicted, it's tough. It's tough when you're an addict, but it's still your fault. I know it's kind of a harsh thing to say, but it's the truth. But there's a cure for that. There's a cure for veganism. It tastes good too. It's called a steak. All right. Does anyone have anything they want to share or say? Oh, Nancy got her hand up. I didn't miss that. Sorry, Nancy. Nancy, how are you this morning? Good to see you. And you are in New York as well. So you, if I'm not mistaken, you're still in New York, I think. And so you're probably subjective to, we'll see what happens with Eric Adams and his.
Oh, brother. But I'm upstate, so it makes it just a little better.
Okay. You're out of the city then, at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But my question is, okay, so I have a folate deficiency.
Okay. It's manifested as what? By lab number, or is that clinical symptoms?
Lab number. I have no symptoms.
Okay, then you don't have folate deficiencies more, as far as I'm concerned. Here's the thing. I mean, this is the problem here. What does a folate deficiency do to us? What do we know about folate deficiency? Well, it leads to megaloblastic anemia. It leads to sores in our mouth. It leads to some other fairly significant symptoms, neural tube defects if you're a pregnant woman, or fetus growing in a pregnant woman. So you don't have any of those things. So in my view, I'm like, who cares? I mean, that's how I look at this. I mean, my folate, I've checked it, it's been below normal. I don't really care. I don't have any symptoms associated with that. Again, this is a problem with relying on lab numbers, as opposed to what's going on clinically. Now, maybe there's some advanced testing you could look at and say, what's going on with homocysteine and all these other things that are lab. But at the end of the day, they're all lab numbers. And so, again, I'm not convinced that the labs in a carnivorous population are going to be congruent with the labs on a standard American diet population. So so that's my thought. Now, if you said, hey, I've got megaloblastic anemia and I've got sores in my mouth and I have some other symptoms consistent with folate deficiency, then I'd say, hey, okay, then eat some more liver or take a supplement or something like that. But if you're not showing that, I mean, it's like, it's like people that, oh, my testosterone is only 320 and it's normals between 300 and 1,000. I'm like, well, you symptomatic? No, then don't worry about it. I know it sounds there's functional medicine doctors. They'll say, well, the optimal range of this is you got to have it. Here's my supplements. All bullshit in my view. I think, so anyway, that's, that's what I would say. Now, again, could you correct that? Yeah, you could eat some liver, you could take a folate supplement. You could, I think, eat some more eggs. You could, maybe some shellfish, I believe, higher in folate. And you could bring that up, and you probably would feel exactly 0% better. Right. So, it's like, okay, why am I doing it? Maybe you like that stuff. That's what, again, if you want to play the numbers game, you can always manipulate your numbers. You can make vitamin D super high by supplementing. You can make your folate high by supplementing. Does it actually have a net positive clinical effect? That's debatable in my view. But, if you're, like I said, I know you have seen so much improvement in your health over the last couple of years. Gosh, you've gone from basically nearly bedridden, if I'm not mistaken, to now having kind of a life back. And so, I'm, like I said, maybe I'm wrong. I could be, but I look at this and I've seen, so many examples of this, I always point to the example of, these Inuit Eskimos in Greenland that they looked at vitamin D levels. Their vitamin D levels were both low. One group was eating the traditional diet of, seafood and, marine mammal fat and all that stuff. And they had low vitamin D because they don't have much sunlight. They had no symptoms of vitamin D deficiency and no rickets in the kids. And another group with the exact same serum vitamin D level. The numbers are almost exactly the same. But now this group has rickets and all these other vitamin D deficiency symptoms. And why does one group with the same lab number have symptoms and one doesn't? Well, the difference between their diet is the one that was eating their native diet didn't have symptoms. The one that was eating their native diet plus sugar and grain and flour and canned goods got the rickets. So again, it's more than just, in my view, the number on the lab sheet. It's, what else is going on. And, like I said, it maybe we just need a little less folate as carnivores in our serum. I don't know. There's not any studies on that. There probably won't ever be, or maybe there'll be. Maybe if this goes mainstream eventually, and people look into it and say, hey, is it a real issue or not? Just like the lean mass hyperresponder with hypercholesterolemia, is that truly a problem for some people? The answer to that, I would say, is I don't know at this point. I'm saying there are studies that are suggestive that it's not. And those, as Dave Feldman and Dr. Budoff and those guys get those studies done, at least they'll be published and say, hey, look, these people that are lean with, good cardiometabolic factors with very high cholesterol don't seem to be progressing to cardiovascular disease, that we can detect up to this point, short term, right? Midterm, whatever, 5-year data, 6-year data. And then, they continue to follow them up over 10, 20 years. Well, none of us are, by the time, none of us are going to wait 20 years to, wait for that. Some people will. There's some people that will wait till there's 20 years of data. Well, okay, wait, if you want to sit there and have mental health issues and chronic, Crohn's disease and lose your colon, you can wait. Go ahead and wait. Not me. I'm like, let's full steam ahead and let's help people. But anyway, all right. Johanna has her hand up. Good morning, Johanna, or
Thanks,
afternoon.
Shawn.
I think, where you're at, I think.
Hello. So I have a question about iodine. I bought this 5%, like this dark one.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard that I should just put some drops under my tongue. So I did just recently. And it feels like I have acid in my mouth. It just burns. So I wonder if that's normal. What should I do? And if people have any thoughts about this iodine.
Well, as far as the symptoms of it burning in your mouth, I mean, I guess I would just dilute it. I guess. I mean, I've never done it, so I can't speak to the burning sensation. If anybody else has done sublingual iodine drops, I mean, I know there's people that have done that. Um, is it? I mean, does it say anything on the bottle about that, or how to consume it, or anything like that? So, I mean, dilute it, make it, 10-to-1 water or something like that, dilute it down. I mean, it's going to get the same effect, still going to absorb. I mean, if that's the only concern, then that's what I would do. I mean, I would just dilute it down a little bit, and still going to be, it's still going to, that oral mucosa tends to be fairly permeable. That's why, a lot of like toxic compounds, they tell them to avoid mucous membranes, and like your scrotum, if you're a man, your scrotum, because those are very thin membranes where things can absorb through that. So that is, what I would just try diluting it and see what happens. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's a bad batch. I don't know. Like I said, I've got no experience personally with that. I honestly don't see a lot of people supplementing iodine, but anyway, Rick says, I do sublingual iodine. So maybe Rick, you care to comment on that? Do you have any issue with that? Some people are putting it in their coffee. So they're mixing it. I don't know, I don't know if hot coffee.
I was told by a guy that has got a lot of experience in iodine supplementation that you need to start with 1 or 2 drops from your pipette and build that up slowly over time so that you become more and more tolerant. Put it under the tongue. It only needs to sit there for a minute at the most, and then you can clean your mouth. You can wash your mouth with water, spit out the saliva, because you're putting it under the tongue, there's lots of blood vessels there, and the iodine will absorb quickly into your bloodstream. So start off with 1 or 2 drops, and you can build up to you need maximum 8 droplets a day, and that's it, okay? And build up your tolerance. If you need to dilute, as Shawn says, you can put the drops in a bit of water and sip the water. But I just put them straight under the tongue, hold it there for a minute. Once the flavour starts to disperse, I then just rinse my mouth out, and that's it. You can also put it on your skin. You don't have to put it under your tongue. You can absorb it like on the back of your arm or somewhere like that, on your shoulder. It will leave a yellow stain, but it will disappear because it will be absorbed in. You can do that as well. But sublingual is the best. Make sure your salt is good, that you're getting plenty of salt in your diet, and that will help you expunge the other halides like the bromines and things, and fluoride. So you need plenty of salt and plenty of water in your diet. And the iodine will help, because a lot of the reason why people are doing iodine supplementation is to get rid of things like the fluoride. Like we've got fluoridized water in the UK, which I don't drink the tap water as much as possible. And people are buying those machines to remove the fluoride. But actually, salt water flushing and iodine supplementation can help you to eliminate fluoride as well, and bromide if you've got that in your system. But anyway, good luck with that. I do recommend it. I feel I've been doing it for about a month now. I was doing it about 5 years ago, and I definitely feel better since I've started the supplementation on iodine.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Rick.
Thank
I just
you.
want to, there's a comment on YouTube about liver being the superfood and all that stuff. And I constantly get questions about it. I don't consume any. I mean, I try, I did my time early on trying to add it in, and this and that. And I honestly, 1, I didn't like it. Number 2, and I had to prepare all kinds of grass finished in fine restaurants and things like that in different ways, and skies and all these things. And I never enjoyed it. And more importantly, I didn't notice any benefit whatsoever. And I think it's something that, while liver certainly has a higher percentage of certain nutrients, it's very high in things like iron and, vitamin C and, choline and things like that. I've yet to see convincing evidence in actual human beings, either in direct observation after observing groups of thousands of people on the carnivore diet, or in studies that have looked at this, i.e. the Harvard study, basically shows no real difference in outcomes, at least across general population. So I tell people, hey, if you want it, if you like it, eat it. If you don't eat it. And that seems to serve most people pretty well. There are certainly some people that say they feel better when they consume it. And it maybe it's, you know, it may be that some people are particularly nutritionally depleted in the beginning. And then after a period of time, as your nutritional stores sort of recover, then you're less likely to eat it. I mean, most of the people that have been doing carnivores far longer than me. Now, I'm in my 7th year, and there have been people doing this, you know, 20 plus years, some 50, 60 years. And many of them will say, I never bother with liver or organ meats, and I do fine with that. And I think that's, you know, that's until someone absolutely proves otherwise with some sort of randomized control trial or some clear study, then I'm not buying it. I think a lot of the people that are out there pushing these supplements, particularly these organ meat supplements, are just, I think they're preying on people. You know, I think they're preying on people, and I think it's predatory, and I discourage that behavior, and I don't support that behavior. Having said that, if you want some liver, eat it. You know, there's nothing wrong with it, in my view. I know there's people say, well, you know, you're going to get vitamin A toxicity. And again, I'm kind of like, you know, if you're eating a ton of it, but probably not. All right, Mac's got his hand up. Good morning, Mac. How are things in Florida?
Good morning, Shawn. I just wanted to go back to what Joanna's question as far as the iodine. If you've got a lot of mercury amalgam fillings, iodine will react with those metals. So using it topically, if you happen to have fillings, is a better way to introduce it. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay. All right. And so I'm just going to go back to YouTube. There's another question on there from Bauer Godall's asking about monitoring ketone levels, and is there any utility or efficacy or benefit for doing that? You know, I'm not a big ketone monitor person. I've checked mine a few times over my life, and I don't really care that much about it. I think for most people, the answer is, you know, I mean, you know, I've said this many more times. What is your goal? Your goal is not to have high ketones. Your goal is to lose weight, get healthier, improve your mental health, you know, mitigate some disease, whatever. And so that's the goal. Now, whether or not your ketones are elevated or not may or may not have any relevance to that, you know, and it's one of those things that, as you know, many of us have been on low carb diets for long periods of times, ketogenic style diets where we should be in ketosis, we'll notice that our ketones aren't very high. And we're like, oh my God, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? Well, very likely it could be just really efficient in utilizing them, right? So, I mean, our brain particularly, and then our muscles secondarily, become, you know, more and more efficient at utilizing those ketones, so they don't hang around in the blood as much. You know, it's like bragging about high blood glucose. Well, look at all this energy I got in my blood. Well, that's not good. You know, same thing with high ketones. It's like, well, I mean, you know, can your body actually utilize them, or are you just producing all this waste that you're not utilizing, and then you're just peeing it out? And so maybe, you know, maybe for weight loss, you know, you're like, well, I'm peeing off energy, so maybe I'm gonna lose some weight. But I mean, you know, but then you're like, well, I'm tired all the time because I'm peeing off all this energy and I can't utilize it. So, I mean, I don't get too hung up on ketones very much. Now, there may be some selected, you know, interventions, maybe cancer therapies or epilepsy, of course, which has been classically known for, that ketosis has been shown to be helpful. But again, I don't know. I mean, I'm not even sure in those states, because I know a number of epileptics on a carnivore diet that don't have particularly high ketones, that don't have seizures anymore. So, I mean, again, is it the removal of the garbage, the sugars and processed foods and all that garbage, that's actually the issue? Or is it the high level of beta hydroxybutyrate? You know, you talk to guys like Dom D'Agostino, and I think he would even say, you know, we don't know 100% for sure. I mean, there's been obviously studies on exogenous supplementation, but I mean, again, what are the other variables in there? So again, so the answer to the question on YouTube, I'm not too concerned about ketone levels. Other people would give you different answers, but that's my personal take on that. All right. So, Charlie, are there any labs that are critical to respond, indicating some organs are being stressed to fail? Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, there's things that are critical. I mean, you know, hemoglobin. If your hemoglobin is, you know, 3, you know, when it should be something like, you know, 12, 14 or something like that. I mean, you're bleeding to death. I mean, that's a pretty important lab to know. Your acid base number, you know, if your pH is really much below about 7.3, you know, you're around 7.2, you're in the ICU, and below 7, you're dead. So, I mean, yeah, there's numbers that are important. You know, hemoglobin, you know, blood glucose, you know, 300, that's important. I mean, I think some of these numbers are, you know, in context. I mean, there's always context that you have to do that, you know. So I think, so there, I usually look at it as, number one, is the patient sick in front of me? No, if they're not sick, then it's unlikely that a lab value is going to be all that helpful. Now, if someone's sick, oh my God, I'm unresponsive. What's their blood glucose? Maybe they're in a diabetic coma. What's their hemoglobin? Maybe they're bleeding to death. I'm using the most extreme examples here, obviously, and there's some subtlety to this. Kidney failure. That's another one. Your potassium levels are climbing. Your creatinine is super high. Without another explanation. This is one of the things where people see a subtle rise in their serum creatinine on carnivore, and they're like, and even their doctor will say, "Oh my God, your kidneys, there's something wrong with your kidneys," and they don't have enough sort of experience. I will say knowledge. If you're on a high protein diet, and a carnivore diet, typically compared to the standard American diet, is a high protein diet. At the minimum, most people are getting 20% of their calories from protein. Most people 30, and some as high as 40 or more. Your creatinine is very likely going to rise a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean your kidneys are failing. That just means you're eating more protein. Now, if you weren't eating a lot of protein and you saw the same rise, then that would actually be an issue, right? Because again, you have to put it in context, and that's why physicians are supposed to take a history and physical, and they're supposed to, like, what's going on? What could explain this? Is this a normal phenomenon, or is this pathology? And a lot of the physicians, they don't, you go to a doctor's office today and you got 15 minutes from the time you hit the door to the time you leave the room. 6 or 7 of those minutes are taken up doing friggin' paperwork. The nurse coming in there doing a review of systems. Have you had these 20 conditions? And you say no. And then the doctor comes in, shakes your hand, and turns on the computer and starts typing into that. And going over your labs. Maybe he asks you a couple questions. Maybe they're relevant. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just. Sometimes they ask you questions just so they can bill at a higher level. I'm telling you how it is. It's not, well, he really cares about. No, he's asking you all those questions because he can upcode. He can code it. He can code it from a level 3 encounter to a level 4 encounter and get an extra $50 for the visit. A lot of times that happens, and it's not doing your job as a physician. It's just filling in the squares to meet the coding requirements. So that's. And not all physicians do, but many do, because they've been told by the coding part, hey, if you just ask this extra question, you could code for a level 4 instead of a level 3. Okay, well, I'm going to ask this question, whether it even has any relevance to what the patient is here for, right? So it's an interesting system. So if you don't put it in context and know what you're dealing with, the labs can be. Because I get it all the time. People literally send me their labs on social media all the time. Hey doc, what do you think about these labs? And most of the time I just ignore it, because I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know anything about you. I don't know if you're dead, if you're alive, if you're sick, if you're healthy. I don't know what your history is. I know what it's in comparison to. So it's better that I don't even answer that question. So if you're sending me your labs without context, without it, and most likely I'm not going to respond anymore. I did initially, and I'd say thumbs up, or whatever. This is nuanced, or I need more information. But I've gotten to where I can't keep up with all that stuff, and people sending me to labs without context. I'd rather just talk to somebody and learn that. But anyway, okay. Coach Shawn is saying liver enzymes as a lab. Yeah, the liver enzymes, they can be indicative of some things. They can be elevated for pathology. They can elevate it for exercise. We know that. We know hard exercise can bump your liver enzymes for up to a week. So again, you have to put these things in context, or recent infection, or whatever. You had a cold. Sometimes, stress will do that. So, this is, again, this is why I don't get, there's people come in there and they, oh my God, my HDL went from 57 down to 52. What am I doing wrong? I'm like, probably nothing, but there's people that get so infatuated with that. We have access to labs like we never had before, right? We have, you can literally walk into the lab court, and if you got the money, they'll do it. They'll draw your blood all day long. They'll take freaking $1,000 worth of lab from you without even blinking an eye, and then you get that information, and then you get them back, and one lab's abnormal. So what do? You go to Google. What does this mean? Well, it could mean this, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, it's this and this and this, and it could very well mean it's like, no big deal. 20% of the population has an abnormality in their labs. I've said this over and over again. For all you guys, if I were to sit there and draw labs on everybody in the room today, I guarantee I would find abnormal labs in every one of you guys, depending on how many labs I did. And that's just normal. I mean, that's just the way things are. Now, the question is there any relevance to that? And the answer is, I don't know. Depends on what's going on. High fasting, triglycerides. You know, again, I mean, you know, there's context. Well, did you, how long were you fasting? You know, did you eat something? You know, I mean, again, I know you said fasting, but I mean, it's you know, how long did you fast? What did you eat before you fasted? Is it long enough? I think one of the things with a carnivore diet is, particularly like the thing for like fasting glucose. I don't think most of us are truly fasting in you know, like if I eat a 1 pound of steak, it's probably still winding its way through my intestines 12 hours later. That's why a lot of us have steady energy, because our body is still breaking down and absorbing that food, because our gut intentionally slows things down so it can suck all that nutrition out of us, so we don't waste it. That's why we don't poop very much, because it's all being absorbed. And it, you know, as opposed to like sugar, which is quick on, quick off. You know, big old steak is going to take 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours, maybe 18 hours to get absorbed. And that whole time you're not actually fasting, because I mean, you still got food in your belly. And so I don't consider that fasting. So when people say, well, my blood glucose was 105, and when I woke up in the morning, 9 hours after I ate a big steak, I'm like, well, you're still digesting food. So, I mean, it's very context dependent. Hang on, so I dropped some. Hang on a sec. All right, there's another rant. Rick saying my digestion has never been happier 5 months on the Lion diet. Yeah, it's interesting, you know, and there's people that will still, I hear this every single day. My digestion has never been better. My gut health has never been better. You know, I don't bloat. I don't have pain. I don't have discomfort. I don't have reflux. My bowel movements are, you know, perfect, right? I mean, that is the definition of a normal, functioning, healthy digestive system. Yet people will tell you, well, all that meat's going to inflame your gut, and all that meat's going to lead to colorectal cancer. All that meat's going to lead to all these things. I'm like, well, if that were true, why are people that are eating the most meat on the planet not experiencing those symptoms? I mean, you know, this is in my view, this is the best way to falsify these weird narratives. You know, these like Seventh-day Adventist, you know, religious directed nutritional narratives. You know, you guys remember that the American Dietetics Association was founded in 1917 by a bunch of Seventh-day Adventists who were fervent religious vegetarian, you know, beliefs. And this is the foundation of nutrition science. Modern nutrition science is founded on basically vegetarian religious ideology, and it's permeated that ever since. And so, so when you have a group of people that eat basically nothing but meat all day long, you know, like I said, I eat literally 20 times the average amount of red meat that the average American eats. And so, if it were truly bad for us, I should be the sickest person on the planet. I mean, I should be dead already. I mean, realistically, I mean, we all should, and yet that's not happening. So that is something to consider. Let me go back to YouTube here and see what we have in here. Some people talking about an ultra marathon. I like I said, I'm aware of a number of people who have done carnivore and done very well in ultra marathons. So that is certainly doable. There's a lot of people that have done that. So it just takes, you know, it takes a little while to get used to it. Certainly not a marathon runners and half marathon runners and triathletes, and a lot of athletes have been able to do this quite well. And it's saying the closer I get to pure carnivore, the better my health. Good enough for me. Yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, it's one of those things where, I mean, I think all of us intuitively know when we feel good and when we don't. And I mean, there's a lot of value in that. You know, you don't, you go to the doctor for, well, in times past, you would go to the doctor when you were sick, right? You go for a reason. Nowadays, you know, it's like the annual visit and all this stuff. And, you know, it's like, there's this sort of, I don't know, almost this, nanny state medicine. You know, we need to check on you to make sure you're doing the right things. And then, you know, they order a bunch of labs, which often will result in some more tests, which often result in some sort of pharmaceutical prescription, whether you feel like you need it or not, you know. And it's just, you know, it's just kind of interesting how that has evolved. You know, it's like 60% of all continuing medical education is sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. Most medical schools in this country were set up and funded by pharmaceutical companies. And so doctors are just, I mean, they're good people in the most part. I mean, I went into medicine with, aspirations and hopes of helping people. And, and then at some point in my career, probably about, I don't know, you start out, you go to medical school, you're overwhelmed. It's like, swallowing from a fire hose, so much information. You're just trying to swim to kind of catch it up and memorize as much as possible and then regurgitate it for the test. And then you do your residency where you just get your ass kicked. I mean, surgical residency, especially when I did, no sleep. A few hours of sleep a night for years on end. You just, it was just like, it was you versus the system, trying to survive that. And then you go into, you start your career and then it's you versus the system. It's you versus the insurance companies trying to get stuff done. The insurance company fighting you, and you're always fighting to get things done for your patients. And then, you're fighting against the administration once you do all this stupid stuff. And then at some point, then you realize I'm not really helping people like I thought I was going to. And it's just a revelation. I mean, I can remember, I think I was probably, I don't know, early 40s when I figured that out, that I was like, I'm not actually doing what I set out to do. When I went through all this 13 years of training, 4 years of college and 4 years of medical school, and 5 years of surgical training, I'm not doing what I set out to do when I was a young, bright-eyed, medical student, 20-something-year-old kid. Mark Cucuzella interview here. Accomplished ultra-runner book, Run for Your Life. Yeah, I saw Mark in Denver. Mark's a great guy. I really like Mark, former Air Force vet, just like me. And he said that, it's really sad to hear, because he had worked, very hard to get the hospital to recognize low-carb meals for their patients and to clean up the cafeteria and get rid of some of the garbage out of the cafeteria. And new administration came in and they just sabotaged all that. Said, nope. We're going to go back to our garbage. And so, it's tough, just tough to see that stuff. Anyway. People just commenting on how much food they're eating. Yeah, and I'm 105 and ate about 1.5 pounds of meat a day. Says Cat. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I eat considerably more than that, but I'm 2.5 times the size of Cat, so I should eat more. So I probably eat roughly 2.5 times the amount of meat she does. So, all right. Anybody else have anything they want to chime in on? We've got another 15 minutes or so. And then I'll just continue to jump back and forth to YouTube.
Dr. Baker, for that YouTuber that asked the question about marathon running, that you might point them to your interview with Dr. Cucuzella on this channel. That was very good. Okay.
Yeah. So Mark Cucuzella, don't ask me to spell it. Like Cucezella or something like that. Anyway, you can find it. Mark Cucuzella. He did that. I interviewed Charles Washington, who's a marathon runner. He's been carnivore now for 15, 16 years, something like that. I've interviewed several, I used to do HBO with Zach Bitter, and we would interview carnivore marathon runners and stuff like that. Mike McKnight has been intermittently carnivore and has done some ultra marathons. There's a guy from Brazil who's done 100-milers as a carnivore. I've interviewed him. I forget his name now, unfortunately. Rick has his hand up again.
Yeah, I just put a link to an article in the chat. It's nothing to do with carnivore, but it's a study based on CDC data showing that people who've been injected 4 times with the so-called vaccine are now expected to lose 25 years on average in life expectancy. The link says from skynews.com.
Yeah.
And there's a paper being released by the Cleveland Clinic data and US data and insurance companies as well. He's a #1 ranked insurance analyst. Anyway, the study shows that, anyway, you can read it. It's in the chat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just have to say, I have my doubts about any study that's going to predict 20 or whatever years. I mean, I just across the board. I mean, when people tell me eating meat's going to take 5 years,
I don't know about the science, so
yeah, you know, like I said, I mean, that's fine, and you know, you can talk about that. And you know, I mean, just full disclosure, I didn't get the vaccine. I wasn't interested in it. I mean, I didn't feel I needed it. I didn't, you know, on and on. But at the same time, I think some of these claims, I mean, I just look at them and like, who knows? I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, obviously the truth sometimes lies in the middle, and you see these polar extremes on both sides where it's there's nothing wrong with it. Everybody should take them. You should have 20, you know, every get as more, the better. There's people out there that are lining up and, you know, still injecting. There's other people that think, you know, they're going to inject overlord lizard nanobots into you to control you. I mean, there's probably the truth in the middle somewhere where it's probably, you know, in my mind, I think the efficacy was overblown. I don't think it was as efficacious as they said it was. Clearly it wasn't. Everybody that I know that got vaccinated still got sick anyway. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound too good. And there are definitely some people that had problems with it, you know, and some significant problems. So, I mean, I think it's one of those things where, I mean, I'm, you know, as a physician, you know, I mean, whenever a drug company would tell me and promise me the moon, I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. Or chick, you know, it's usually, I mean, the drug companies always put these really attractive women in there to come in and be cheerleaders and try to get you to, you know, almost it was almost like a, you know, a flirtatious type of thing. So you could, I mean, it was really kind of sketchy, to be honest, to sell their drug product. And it was just like, you know, well, I don't necessarily believe that stuff. And it's, you know, one of those things. And I mean, I've been around long enough to see a number of drugs be recalled, a number of procedures shown to not be efficacious. And usually, you know, but when you listen to the hype, it's more, you know, it's a lot more than what they deliver. And so one of the things is we always overpromise and underdeliver. And that's the same across the board in medicine. So I think that's just buyer beware type of thing. I will say, and you know, I got banned and suspended for saying this. I mean, I said, you know, I think people should have informed consent, and they should be allowed to make their own choices, you know, which I think is a very fair statement. But all right. What do we have? And so I'm only salt, no other supplements. Yeah, that's pretty much how I am. I don't take supplements. I mean, I will like, well, this is element in here. This is an electrolyte mix. And one of the reasons is Rob sends me the stuff every month. I get a container of them. So, I you know, otherwise I just probably use salt because I'm pretty cheap. But yeah, I mean, that's it for me. I don't take multivitamins. I don't go out of my way to supplement. I don't take vitamin D. I don't take vitamin C. I don't take whatever, folate or all these things that some people might suggest supplementing. I you know, arguably do quite well, but you know, we'll see. I mean, you know, maybe if I don't live to 100, it'll be the carnivore diet that killed me. You know, you know, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll die at 112 and they'll say, well, if you'd only eaten plant-based diet, you would have lived to 115 or something. I mean, you never hear the end of it. So anyway, okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to chat about?
I have a question.
Of course. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I've struggled with you know, some form of IBS or Crohn's for over 20 years.
Okay.
And that's what led me here, you know, because this is like the ultimate elimination diet, and hopefully it's going to help me. But a functional doctor said that I had a double mutated gene, MTHFR, which basically means, you know, my cells can't function at the level that they're supposed to. It makes it very difficult to clear out toxins and things like that. And it says it also makes it tough for metabolizing like a higher fat diet.
Okay.
So so when you start to transition fully, I mean, you know, do you still have to keep the fat intake high to where it, like, you know, could eventually cause trouble? Or, you know, how would you work around something, you know, like that, where you can't really metabolize the fat like you should?
Well, I mean, you know, high percentage of people have these MTHFR mutations in society. I mean, some people estimate up to 60% of the population has some mutation in this gene. So it's actually more almost like the normal state for most people. And I would say that, you know, you are going to need an amount of fat in your diet to function without carbohydrates. I mean, that's pretty clear. And so what that number is going to vary from person to person. I mean, obviously, I would, you know, what I would do is just start eating and see how you do. I mean, you know, I know these precision medicine and genetic testing and all that stuff. And very often it's like, okay, well, what population are you testing this on? You know, where do these recommendations come? Do they come from people on carnivore diets? Or do they come from people on eating junk food diets? Because, you know, there's very likely that something else in our diet, or lack of something else in our diet, is contributing to some of the issues with this. I mean, I've said, you know, the reason I say, you know, like I said, I've seen people with, say, genetic diseases like Ehlers-Danlos, you know, where they are supposed to, I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but I mean, they have this connective tissue disorder where their joints are super lax, their skin's real stretchy, and their joints are always dislocating, and it's pretty, you know, can be pretty tough existence. And yet by going carnivore, I've seen many of those people actually notice that their joint stability is much better. They don't dislocate their joints anymore. They improve significantly. And that's a genetic disorder. You're like, well, why the hell would that, why would a diet have such an impact on a genetic disorder? And so it could be that the you know, this genetic defect is exacerbated by a standard American diet and made worse. And then you have issues with folate metabolism. And it may be that by doing a non-junky diet, you know, it becomes less phenotypically present. I mean, again, this is all speculation, but I mean, so I mean, I you know, I would, you know, just limit your fat to 20% or something. I wouldn't do that. I would just say, hey, just eat a normal amount of fat, see what you need, get enough energy, and see how you do. And then you can adjust upward or downwards depending on what you're doing. But I mean, I've seen a lot of people with that same genetic mutation. Well, some version, if there's many of them, do fine on carnivore. You know, I mean, and this is something that is not well studied within the context of a carnivore diet. I personally am less, you know, I know Chris Masterjohn talked about that a little bit. And, you know, maybe some people say, well, maybe you can add some folate in or something like that. I mean, maybe, I mean, you can play with that, but I mean, it's not, I mean, you know, that genetic defect was there prior to, and did it impact your health in any way? I don't know. I mean, you know, were you consciously eating a low fat diet because of that? I mean, I don't know, maybe you were. And how did that work for you? You know, I mean, question, how did it work for you? Well, you know, what is that? What's the guy, Dr. Phil or whatever? How's that working out for you? Right. So, I mean, I think you just kind of play and see, you know, and if you have to make an adjustment, you know, you do. But I mean, I think there's, you know, I think just improving the diet quality alone is going to dramatically improve things. And if you have to make some sort of subtle adjustment down the road, then do it. But I, you know, like I said, I've yet to see a consistent pattern with people with that type of genetic defects have had to all significantly alter their carnivore diet. Maybe there's somebody in there, because a lot of us have that. I mean, I may have it. I don't know. Maybe I have never tested. I don't care to test it. I mean, maybe I do. You know, there's probably someone in here who has tested, and maybe can comment on that. But I mean, and maybe they've done something differently. But I beyond just starting out eating enough fat to keep your machine running, you know, like I said, fat is your fuel in this situation. You know, protein is your structure, fat is your fuel, and you know, you're going to need a specified amount. Most people, it's between 60 and 80%. I mean, that's kind of average, you know, calories. I'm talking fat per calorie. So that's about 1 gram of fat per 1 gram of protein puts you in the lower end of that. And as you get to 2 grams of fat per 1 gram of protein, you're up over 80%. So Kat has her hand up, maybe some insight on this or something else.
Yeah, I do. I have the double THFR
Right.
mutation also. But it's even on keto. I never showed high homocysteine, which is, you know, what they use to determine if it's an issue or not. And then on carnivore, it's even better. So I used to play around with supplementing folate, and I do not, and I'm just fine.
There you go. There's, I mean, again, there's an N of 2. I mean, N of 1. I mean, you know, so again, that's been my, you know, I mean, what about this? What about ApoE4 and all that stuff? I'm like, you know, at best it's speculative, you know, and again, I think, you know, I mean, you know, this was Rick was talking about living an extra 25 years or living less 25 years. I don't know any of those answers. I don't know if it's going to make you live longer or shorter. Honestly, I mean, I would be disingenuous to suggest one way or the other. What I do know is if you're healthier, then that's all I can hope to do, is get people that are sick and make them healthy. And how long you live is up to God, as far as as far as I'm concerned. So I mean, it's like, you just get as healthy as you can and enjoy it, and repeat those days. And I think the more days that you have good, healthy days, the better your quality of life is. And like I said, from my standpoint, I think death is the sort of the compilation of chronic disease. You get disease until then you're dead. And I think the less diseased you are, the less close you are to death. Now, you can always get struck by lightning or hit by a bus or, whatever, or some freak accident or whatever, or something happens. But I think when it comes to chronic disease, the less disease you manifest, the less likely you are to death. And I think the more you approach what you were able to do physically as a younger person, the closer you stay to that, the less close you are to death. That's a simple sort of way I seem to think about it. Like I said, if I'm as fast and as strong as I was when I was 30, then good for me. But if I start to significantly drift away from that, well, then my time on earth is running out. So, all right. All right, Ann, enjoyed it. Thanks, Ann, for saying that. And I guess it has been an hour, so this has been fun, guys. So I will be back tomorrow for you guys here, and also the YouTube folks, same time, 9:00 Pacific time. Hopefully you guys have some questions and we can chat about whatever. Hopefully they won't ban me between today and tomorrow. So, all right, guys, thank you very much. And